It was reported as a positive trip by the IAEA chief Rafael Grossi to Iran's capital, Tehran. Grossi hailed relations between Iran and the IAEA as positive after meeting with Iran's atomic chief Eslami and Iran's president Ebrahim Raisi. But underlying this trip, IAEA inspectors had reported Iran had enriched uranium close to 84%, which Iran had to then clarify. Why are there such reports which then require Iran to have to defend its stance? And why did Grossi, when asked whether the IAEA is a political tool at the hands of a few, would deny this to be the case? Just a couple of the angles we'll be looking at in this edition of The Spotlight. First, let me introduce our guest. Farshid Bagharian is a political analyst who joins us from Karaj. Also joining us is Don DeBar, who's an activist and commentator joining us from Ossining in New York. Gentlemen, welcome. Farshid Bagharian, first over to you. We're looking at what was this trip that took 2 days in duration, of which it was, I don't want to use the word hailed, but it was widely reported to be very positive in terms of the cooperation, and some even called an agreement between the IAEA and Iran. But why should this be such a positive thing when you take a look at all the different hardships that Iran has endured based on giving itself that cooperation spirit and then not getting what it should have gotten in return?
Thank you very much, and have a good night. I believe that the International Atomic Agency took the Iranian cooperation as a granted, because Iran, during this talk and deal with Iran for the nuclear talks from 2015 till now, during this time, always Iranian did their duty. But the Western Europe, the Western powers, especially the United States, they didn't act as a friendly act to us. So I just see in some days before, Mr. Putin announced that he withdraw from the START 1 nuclear agreement with the United States. This is what the main reason of the trip of Mr. Grossi to Tehran, because the escalation of the nuclear hazard or nuclear war all around the world, it make them to think about again for Iran, because the particle they found as 84% of enrichment is what merely was the particle, not the activity. And right now the report should be friendly, as they had a common briefing, press briefing, I think, and they told that the enrichment was 60%, and this is acceptable for us. It was acceptable before this trip, and right now they need some guarantee from Iran for not enrich anymore, or maybe help Russia, because Russia is merging for a new attack on the spring to the Ukraine, and the escalation of the nuclear hazard maybe they spread all around the world. This is the fact that they are approaching more friendly to Iran this time. This is the fact, not anything else, because Mr. Ned Price and Mr. Blinken speeches regarding, and their opinion was not friendly, and they told that we are waiting for the report from the Mr. Grossi, and Mr. Grossi is not the decision maker for the West, and just not bringing any he's not bringing any message from West to us. Just Mr. Grossi is take them that Iran did his duty, and Iran is giving the guarantee to not support any nuclear, nuclear, how can I explain, nuclear hazard for the spread over the world. That is the fact that
Okay.
Mr. Grossi was here. Yeah.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you.
Don DeBar, I guess they're talked about 60% enrichment. I have so many questions to ask, but just on that particular note there was a press conference that Grossi had in Vienna just about an hour ago. And this is really interesting. He says on the 60%, the Iranians, don't need to tell us why they reached 60%. What's important, we have the necessary ability to inspect. Isn't that kind of an odd statement to come from the IAEA chief, Rafael Grossi?
it is an odd statement if you expect essentially that these, that the architecture of international relations is, an architecture of honest brokerage. But of course, it's not. It's in the real world. The United States and the Soviet Union were the principal engines of the IAEA. Eisenhower is credited with, being his brainchild in 1957, but the United States didn't ratify the treaty and put it into effect as against the U.S. until 1967. The organization is centered in Vienna. That's in the heart of NATO, basically. And it has been, like the other instruments of international architecture based in Western Europe, an instrument of colonial control of much of the rest of the world. Look at the International Court of Justice and the other, the Hague judicial structures in general, which for some reason seem to prefer to indict African leaders over any other, potential defendants. The objective picture, going on right now is the United States is attempting to isolate each of its enemies between Russia, China, Iran in particular, and also South Africa and others that are beginning to see perhaps the objective requirement of some sort of military cooperation in the face of, an assault from the U.S. and NATO against all of them at once. There are the claims that Iran is sending drones and setting up manufacturing facilities for drones in Russia. There's the claim that China is considering manufacturing weapons for Russia, threats from the United States and all of that. This is the context in which Grossi holds his press conference. Remarkable, actually, is the fact that he didn't claim to find a nuclear suitcase when he was in Tehran and seek to have the U.S. invade and get rid of the weapons of mass destruction, because that is the pressure certainly coming from Washington at the moment.
Farshid Bagharian, taking a look at what question was asked by our Press TV correspondent to Rafael Grossi on the fact that whether the IEA has been politicized in terms of the way information is given out, or that it's being used as a political tool, and in terms of just overall vis-a-vis Iran, how it's given out ambiguous statements. The response by Grossi was, I think any attack, any military attack on a nuclear facility is outlaw, is out of the normative structures that we will all abide by. And he wouldn't even acknowledge that Iran's nuclear facility was actually attacked by Israel on more than one occasion. I mean, this is Rafael Grossi of the past. I'm not too sure what type of transformation he's gone through from then since now when it comes to Israel. Of course, we need to also mention that he went to Israel before there was a resolution leveled against Iran through the Board of Governors in the past. Why is he playing that posturing when asked that question?
I believe that, first of all, thank to our friend. Fully agree with what he said. The fact is, Iran is right now, we have an expression in political science that means that sitting on the fence. Iran right now is sitting on the fence, and Iran can be declined to the right or the left. And that is the fact. Right now, it's terrifying the world. I mean, the nuclear talk is right now, they're terrifying the world. Because we can decline to the third, World War III. Maybe we can decline to the position that may push the war to the peace talks. This is the fact that right now, as you see, 1 or 2 days before, it was a news that in the media that Russia is trying to reach to the Persian Gulf or the Oman Sea, and they can consider that Russia is spreading its power to the whole region. Regarding the Israel, and holding this point right now, regarding the Israel has a very vulnerable size, and Israel is not powerful. Despite of Iron Dome, and Israel is not a safe place for the Israeli people. And any conflict with Iran through drones, through missiles, or any kind of the war machine, it would be very hazardous for the region, especially for the Israeli regime. So right now they are trying to push Iran down from the fence to the exact point or exact site that they want right now. And I want to repeat that Mr. Garusi is not the policymaker guy or the player. Just he sent his report, and remember that before the September after the September 11th, then they attacked Iraq, and they after that because they found some facilities and some site that they are producing chemical and biological and maybe a nuclear weapon, and after that they said that the FBI report was false. Right now, Iran is not giving them any permission to give the false report, and this is the fact that Mr. Gersi
Sure.
was here in Iran.
All right. Don DeBar, as this news is spreading, because it's very fresh off the press, especially given this press conference that Rafael Grossi had in Vienna, a very simple question that comes out of this is, why should Iran trust, I'm not going to say the agency, but the other actors, in particular the U.S., when it comes to anything that has to deal with Iran's civilian nuclear file? I mean, why should there be optimism here, which Grossi is sending this message of optimism? Put that into context for us, if you can.
Yeah, there's a number of ways to do that. Very first is there's supposedly, I mean, there is already an agreement that was negotiated over a period of years with an awful lot of pressure from the United States, an awful lot of determination from Iran to protect its sovereignty, a participation of many others. Agreement was signed, executed, implemented, except for the part where Iran was supposed to get sanctions relief. That never really happened. Trump gets elected. He was campaigning against the agreement, and he abrogated what little participation the U.S. had done up to that point. And Biden ran against that, saying that Trump, was making trouble where there was no need for trouble and that he shouldn't have withdrawn from the agreement. And now we're 2 years into Biden's administration, and we still are here playing this game instead of starting, where we were at on January 20th, 2017. That's the aspect with respect to the U.S. In 2014 and 2015, the United States, some 50 years almost 50 years after the execution of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which calls for the sunsetting of all nuclear weapons within a reasonable period of time, announces, in fact, it's going to spend $1 trillion to renew its nuclear arsenal. And I know that Mr. Grossi was not the head of the IAEA at the time, but I don't see any statement right now demanding that the United States cease and desist from that. Finally, in the context of the war in Ukraine, the nuclear doctrine of Russia was spelled out very simply, which is, number one, we will only use nuclear weapons if we are attacked with nuclear weapons or if the very survival of our state is threatened. And the U.S. response to that was to announce that they intended to take down the Russian state. If I were the head of the IAEA, I would then condemn the United States, first of all, for making this statement, and then tell them you have to do everything to back out of this condition so you don't provoke a nuclear war. And I don't see any of that happening. I see them nickel and diming Iran, impugning its integrity and sovereignty, and, frankly, shilling for Israel.
Okay, so since both have mentioned Ukraine in this context in terms of Iran, Farshid Bagharian, are we looking at the fact that instead of anybody pinning their hopes on something coming out of all the positive, from what it appears to be positive news coming from Grossi, that this is just so Grossi, through the IAEA, which is one of the UN's organization, which the U.S. provides at least almost a quarter of its budget, that they just want to have some kind of watch over Iran's civilian nuclear program, but they're not going to give any type of room for Iran because they believe that Iran, which Iran has denied, is providing Russia with these, for example, drones.
I believe that the watchdogs group, prior to the trip of Mr. Garusi, was in Iran, and they inspected everything. And so He was, how can I explain? It was a political show only, merely, and nothing else. But the friendly and positively report has not make sense for Iran, first of all, because we are facing another decision making. For example, right now, the Congress and the Senate of the United States is not giving power to the Mr. Biden administration, Mr. Biden himself, for example, to sign any new agreement with Iran, and they have to pass it. Because the legitimacy of this, the agreement would be passed from the Congress, and they're very blockage and obstacle for Iran for any new agreement for Iran. But I'm going to repeat again, the fact is we are approaching a new world war, maybe hazard, because Mr. Gerasimov is right now is the head of the operation of the new spring attack to Ukraine, and the Gerasimov doctrine itself contains the using of the nuclear power, and that is the fact that the world is right now is being terrified, and in this position they want to how can I explain, to make Iran silence, to not cooperate with Russia as a strategic tie or yeah.
Well, when you say this cooperation, that's a good point. We're kind of straying a little bit away from the from the subject here, but Don DeBar, this cooperation between Iran and Russia is alarming the White House, and it is definitely alarming Israel. Our guest there says perhaps that the U.S. and Israel, will be looking at this from the top down in terms of them wanting to do things that would restrict this relationship, maybe. But maybe it's the other way around. Maybe they are noticing that this, to them, spells danger for whatever reasons they think that it would, and that they need to somewhat play catch-up in a sense. And so therefore, they need to make sure that things get done. And Iran's civilian nuclear program is one way to at least have some kind of footing inside the Islamic Republic.
It's leverage. That's exactly what it is. Look, they do sanctions for the same reason. The purpose of sanctions, for example, and I'll point out that both Iran and Russia are the subject of massive sanctions from the U.S. and the EU. The purpose of that is to immiserate the population in the countries in the hope that it will create political unrest and the government will fall or be compromised or in a position where it will negotiate from a position of weakness. And the negotiations are high-pressure negotiations, in essence, for concessions to the Western corporations, in the case both of Russia and Iran, primarily of petrochemicals, petroleum, oil, et cetera, at prices favorable to the West, including ownership, which they're not shy about claiming. So the United States, which has dropped $100 billion worth of weaponry and other material aid for a war that's about 13 months old now, active shooting war in Ukraine, is telling Russia and Iran and China that they cannot, of course, have any sort of military aid from one to the other in the face of a major military threat and some 400 military bases facing those three countries under conditions of sanction, under conditions of continuous military provocation, as you pointed out, under conditions where the nuclear facilities are attacked militarily by the U.S. agent in the area, Israel. And so, there is some pushback, but unfortunately for Russia and Iran and China, their sanity prevents them from responding in kind, because this escalates into a global war that serves no one's purposes. But the IAEA should be sitting in, I was going to say Jerusalem, but really Tel Aviv, the capital of the so-called State of Israel, and asking about the 300-plus warheads that exist there illegally. And, the fact that they may or may not, Israel's state may or may not be a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty means nothing. Because if Iran withdrew from the treaty today, it certainly wouldn't mitigate what the U.S. would want to do to Iran under a claim that it has some sort of nuclear weapons. And no one's claiming Iran has anything near the capacity to produce an arsenal like the one that Israel has installed. And it's Iran that's the subject of sanctions and the subject of this, and not Israel.
That's a great point, Farshid Bagherian. When you take a look at the different threats that have come even as recent as just days ago, practically, when you had a top U.S. Defense Department official say that Iran could make enough material for one nuclear bomb in 12 days. You had the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, which has time and again, for practically more than a decade, maybe even longer, make those claims against Iran. Yet you have the U.S. Nuclear Posture Review in 2022 saying there is no evidence that the Iranian government is pursuing a nuclear weapon. Quote, Iran does not today possess a nuclear weapon, and we currently believe it is not pursuing one. That's the Pentagon's authoritative report. You have somebody from the Pentagon saying Iran is going to develop one in 12 days, but the Pentagon report says no, it does not possess a nuclear weapon and it's not pursuing one. What do you make of the threats there, Farshid Bagherian?
Israeli regime is nowadays suffering from the turmoil, domestic turmoil, and I think that Mr. Netanyahu cannot get rid of this turmoil right now, and they are some kind of credit. They are making a credit for the foreign policy to put it in the domestic policy, and we cannot base. Making any it doesn't make sense. The talk with Mr. Netanyahu and all he said about because the line that the Pentagon is said, or maybe the authorities of the United States say that they in 12 days Iran can make the nuclear, a weapon. Is all the words that they are using is derived from the Mr. Netanyahu administration. But the fact is, Iran, after 84% enrichment, they found some particles right now. They are getting down to 60%. And what happened to 12 days? And if you make a calculation, 12 days is right now make to maybe set back to 12 months. Iran is not making any nuclear weapon, and they know this. This is the ideological context, and they know it very well. But they are, I'm trying to repeat my sentence, that they have fear regarding the strategic ties with Russia. And they have feared that maybe Russia can bring some warhead from his own motherland to Iran and put it in maybe some military bases. This is the fact that they are sending the watchdogs to Iran and before the trip of Mr. Gerussi. And the watchdogs is always all the time in the year.
Okay.
They are
let me jump in and give Don DeBar, I'm sorry, 30 seconds is the last question. Yeah. Do you agree with our guest there, what he just said? Because that's a pretty important point.
Yeah, I'll tell you what also is an important point is the fact that's exactly what the U.S. does with the NATO countries. Not Poland and Finland and whoever else that ends up in NATO on the front lines. They're not supposed to have nuclear weapons by treaty. They are signatories to the non-proliferation treaty. But the United States bases nuclear weapons in those countries and says it's not those countries, it's us, and we're allowed.
Thank you. Don DeBar, activist and commentator from Austining. Farshid Bagherian, thank you, political analyst from Karaj.
Good night.
And we'd like to thank you, the viewer, for watching this edition of the Spotlight from Mikhail Tagwe and the team. It's goodbye.